What Jesus is doing here is reestablishing the hierarchy of fidelity that one owes, not really reestablishing it, but reasserting it. So many times, and even recently, I've had a contentious conversation with somebody who would rather maintain their human relationships and only as best as they can maintain their relationship with Jesus, because the human relationship is contending against righteousness and justice and good order and things like that, rather than saying, no, it's what the Lord wants first, and then if you also fit in with that, then I can have a relationship with you. We take the natural obligation to family so far that many times we will not only ignore, but in fact try to rewrite what Christ calls us to do in order to maintain those relationships. I know another family who was, very faithful and understood morality and human anthropology well, until they found out that their daughter had struggled with same-sex attraction and wanted to be in a same-sex relationship. Now all of a sudden it's everything about Jesus except for this. And then it became, well, Jesus embraces this, right? And in their mind, what they're doing is they're doing their most fundamental duty. They're doing their most important thing, which is to love their children, which, if any of you are confused by this, loving your children is not your first important thing. It's not even your second spouse, because with your spouse you can make more kids, right? And then you love your kids. Too many times in the United States we see this is the cause of the dissolution of so many relationships, so many marriages. Children become the center of the parent's life rather than the spouses being the center of each other's lives. And it happens in very practical and subtle ways too, right? You start taking your kids to soccer, you start taking your kids to volleyball, you start taking your kids to baseball, you start taking your kids to basketball, you start taking your kids to lacrosse now, apparently. You start taking your kids to, and I mean the list could go on and on and on. And before you realize it, your life is subservient to your children's schedule, and your relationship with your spouse is likewise. And more importantly, your relationship to God has similarly been subjected. Your relationship to God has been subjected to your children. That's gross. Right? Remembering the order of things is super important. I mean, we know this in mathematics. The order of operations is key. You can do all the individual functions correctly, but if you do them out of order, you can get a drastically incorrect answer. In life, it's the same. There's an order of operations to love. It is be loved by God, return love to God. In that mutual gift of self-giving, you overflow in yourself the love that has been conceived in you by God's love for you. Give birth to that love into the world, that your neighbor might be loved according to their proximity to you. Spouse, children, parents, and then neighbor, in the general sense of the word. Failing this order, family relationships break down and our salvation dissolves. It's lost because we have gotten confused, disordered, and ourselves in this life lost. So, how do we avoid this? Well, we consider what Jesus says here. Who are my mothers and my brothers and sisters? Who are the people who are closest to me? Who are the people that I owe the most obligation, natural and divine obligation to? Well, those who do the will of God, of course. Those who love my Father above all else. They're my brother and sister and mother. It's a beautiful thing, too, that Jesus, without any sort of shame or any sort of qualification, says that those who hear the will of God and do it are my mother. And the reason for that is quite simple. I explained it in the feast day of Mary, Mother of God. When Christ when we have the correct relationship with Christ, it is a spousal relationship. He, the bridegroom, we, the church, the bride. And in our relationship with him, proper and ordinate to that spousal relationship, we conceive within us what he gives to us, and that's charity. And in giving birth to charity, which is God himself, we become mother of God. Right? So, living this day to day, though, can be difficult because we can have so many demands and so many obligations and so many areas where we seek to be just. And so how do we keep them in proper order? How do we make sure we're doing God's will? St. Francis de Sales, in many more ways than what I'm going to just point out, gives us an answer, or at least a cardinal direction to travel in. When I start spiritual direction with anybody, I have them start with reading some of St. Francis de Sales' Introduction to the Devout Life. And there he explains how devotion in any Christian's life necessarily looks different from other people's devotion. No devotion is really the same, particularly when it falls into the category of vocational lifestyle, right? A married person should not want to be in the church all day like a monk. Similarly, a monk should not want to be out involved in all of the world's difficulties like a bishop is. A bishop should not want to have the quiet and calm lifestyle of the monk, and so on and so forth, and even down into the vocational jobs. Francis says, it's wrong. It's even a heresy, he says, to suggest that true devotion or devotion does not belong in the soldier's barracks or in the prince's court. I can't remember if he says something about schools or not, but I mean, it would be applicable today that devotion shouldn't belong in schools. What he suggests, though, is that the true devotion to God should belong in every place in human society, but in its proper order, in its proper perspective, right? The devotion of a soldier is going to look very different from a devotion than the devoted religious life of a mother of five who stays at home and keeps the house afloat for the sake of her family. The devotion of a bishop, like I said, is going to look very different from the devotion of a monk who spends 5 or 6 or 7 hours a day praying. And even though these lifestyles look different from one another, when they're done well, they're done well. The bishop's lifestyle is one of politics, and it gets messy. I'm not saying it should ever be compromising or it should ever be tolerant of evil, but it's messy, right? And he could easily long to have the simplicity of nobody talking into his ear all the time like a monk has, right? But when he stays true to that and he says, okay, this is what the Lord's called me to do, how am I going to do this well? I need to seek the will of God for me in this lifestyle. That's where we find God's will, in the matter of fact of our lives, right? And then we figure out how to love him there. That's when our lives really get well ordered. That's when our lives really become devout, and we actually start to become good Christians living in the world. So ask yourself, if to be in right relationship with God is to be able to be called his mother or brother or sister, and in order to be called that, I have to know the will of God and do it, what is God's will for me in my life here in this life that I have? I'm a priest, right? So it would be an ill use of my time and affection for me to be overly invested in one particular family. Even if I know that family's not mine and it's a parishioner's family, I have too many other responsibilities. That's the whole point of being, one of the points of being celibate, is to be free to invest where and when the need arises, where the wind blows, right? Where the Spirit wills. So that would be an inappropriate use of my affection though it may be. For a married couple to misappropriate your affection to your children at the expense of your affection for one another, that would be disordered and it would cause problems. It would affect your relationship with God as well as your family, right? Perhaps applicable here, to be retired, right? To get to the end of that career path that you're on, to retire and then to live selfishly, right? To say that, now I'm on permanent vacation, rather than understanding your situation to say, now I am free to serve my neighbor and God in a freer, more dynamic way than I've been able to before because I've had to go to work every day. Seeking to be retired not only from our careers, but also from our religious and social obligations. That would be a disorder in our spiritual life, in our human life, right? To think that because maybe I'm ill now and I can't get around as easily as I can't go to the play, maybe I can't even go to church regularly, and then just sit in front of the TV all day would be a disorder, rather than saying, how can I do God's will in my life, in this life that He's given me right now? I know, perhaps I'm being called to now live more like a religious sister or religious brother and spend my day in prayer for the church and for my community because I can't get out, right? Remember St. Therese of Lisieux, who wanted to be a missionary so desperately that when she found herself cloistered in the in Carmel, she offered her stationary and static lifestyle as a platform to send out prayers across the whole world, and in that way fulfill her spirit of mission, her desire to have a missionary lifestyle, to fulfill that in spirit. So we have to ask the Lord, okay, where am I now? What is my life? And I'm not talking about where you are now in terms of like crisis in family or whatever. What does your life look like now? What territory, what terrain are you on? Can you move left, right, front, or back? Can you move up or down? Right? What does the map of your life look like right now? Where do you hear or see or sense or feel or taste God drawing you? In what direction? How do you move from where you are to that direction? How do you go over the obstacle standing between you and that location that God is calling you to? In your particular life, with your particular responsibilities, with your particular skill sets, with your particular weaknesses, provided that they're weaknesses that are just natural weaknesses, not vices that you need to overcome. Those are obstacles, then we have to destroy those, right? But that's what God's will looks like for you in your life. Don't look left or right to see what other people are doing. Don't concern yourself with how holy somebody else looks or how unholy somebody else looks, and how by comparison, as you understand it, you look much better than they, right? But rather simply ask yourself the question, what do I have to do God's will? How do I hear it, and then how do I pursue it in this life that He's given me here and now and today? Because y'all, even here and now and today, there's a call on your life. Right now, there's a call on your life. Fortunately, for all of you, it's almost certainly that you should be here at Mass. Right? There are not many better places to be. But maybe some of you have left your children starving in a closet to come here today. Fortunately, Jen didn't do that, although there are others that she might have locked up in a closet to come here today, right? In that case, I would say, no, you absolutely should not be here. Get the hell out of here, right? Because that would be such a devastating disorder, even of something as high and holy as Mass, right? But I'll bet you, for everybody who is here, and perhaps even for some who aren't here, God's call on your life was to be here right now. So well done. You started the day off right. This is your first check mark on God's will done for the day, right? But what's the next one? Don't power down after you leave here. Ask yourself the question as soon as you leave, what's God got for me next? For me, in my life, right now, as I am. What's he want me to do so that I could really, truly be called his brother or his sister or even his mother?